How would you feel if a stack of legal documents arrived at your door, all because of a single night out? What happens when your husband's trust shatters, and this time he has proof you can't explain away? The truth is about to come out, and I never thought it would end like this. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. The bass thrummed through my chest as I pushed deeper into the crowded nightclub, my skin already glistening with sweat and anticipation. The vibe was packed tonight, bodies pressed together in the dim purple lighting, and for the first time in months, I felt alive. "Morwenna, you look incredible," Grace shouted over the music, her phone already out and recording. "This is exactly what you needed," I laughed, tossing my hair back and adjusting the tight black dress I'd bought specifically for tonight. At 31, I still had it, and I was going to prove it. The wedding ring on my finger caught the strobing lights, but I pushed down the guilt that tried to surface. I deserve this, I told myself, the same mantra I'd been repeating for weeks. Elliot never takes me out anymore. He's always working, always distant. What's wrong with having a little fun? My phone buzzed against my clutch. A text from Elliot. "When will you be home? Ava's asking for you." I rolled my eyes and showed Grace the message. "See what I mean? He can't even let me have one night out without making me feel guilty about our daughter." "Ignore him," Grace said, waving dismissively. "You're not his property. You're a grown woman who deserves to feel wanted." The bartender, Damian, caught my eye from across the bar. He was younger than me, maybe 29, with dark hair and an easy smile that made my stomach flutter in ways it hadn't in years. When he'd started flirting with me last week during girls' night, I'd been flattered. Tonight, I was ready for more. "Ladies, what can I get you?" Damian asked when we reached the bar, his eyes lingering on me longer than necessary. "Surprise me," I said, leaning forward just enough to give him a better view. The attention felt intoxicating. As he mixed our drinks, I felt my phone buzz again. Another text from Elliot. "It's getting late. I'm worried about you." "God, he's so suffocating," I muttered, showing Grace the screen. "You need to put him in his place," she said, already filming me for her Instagram story. "Show him you're not going to be controlled." The drinks arrived and Damian's fingers brushed mine as he handed me the glass. The touch sent electricity up my arm, and I didn't pull away. "You look beautiful tonight, Morwenna," he said, his voice low and intimate despite the loud music. "Thank you," I breathed, feeling my cheeks flush. When was the last time Elliot had called me beautiful? When was the last time he'd even really looked at me? Grace was documenting everything, her phone capturing my interactions with Damian, the way I laughed at his jokes, how I let him touch my hand when he leaned in to talk. I should have cared, should have thought about who might see those stories, but the alcohol and attention were making me reckless. "Dance with me," a stranger said, appearing beside me. He was tall, attractive, maybe in his early 30s. Under normal circumstances, I would have politely declined. Tonight, I took his hand. On the dance floor, I let myself get lost in the music and the feeling of being desired. The stranger's hands found my waist, and I didn't stop him. When another man cut in, I laughed and went with it. Grace was there with her phone, capturing every moment, every touch, every smile. "This is the real you," she shouted, posting another story. "This is the woman who shouldn't be trapped in a boring marriage." My phone kept buzzing with messages from Elliot, but I ignored them all. For once, I was the center of attention, the woman men wanted to dance with, to touch, to be near. It was addictive. Around midnight, Damian's shift ended, and he joined us on the dance floor. His hands were more familiar than the stranger's, and I let him pull me closer than I should have. When he whispered in my ear about going somewhere quieter, I found myself nodding. "Morwenna's living her best life," Grace announced to her phone, tagging me in another story. "Some people need to learn that marriage doesn't mean ownership." We ended up in a corner booth, Damian's arm around me, his lips close to my ear as he told me how unhappy I seemed, how I deserved better, how beautiful I was. Everything Elliot hadn't said in months. "Your husband doesn't appreciate what he has," Damian murmured, his hand resting on my thigh. "He really doesn't," I agreed, the words flowing easier with each drink. "He's always working, always tired, always making me feel like I'm asking for too much when I just want some attention." "You shouldn't have to beg for attention from your own husband," Damian said, his thumb tracing circles on my leg. "A woman like you should be worshipped." The rational part of my brain knew this was wrong, knew I was crossing lines I couldn't uncross. But the neglected wife in me, the woman who felt invisible in her own home, was drowning in the validation. Grace appeared with her phone again. "Say hi to my story," she laughed, and I waved, not caring who might be watching. Morwenna's having the time of her life. It wasn't until I was checking my own phone later that I saw the notification that made my blood run cold. Among the dozens of people who had viewed Grace's stories was a name I recognized, Elliot Hale. My husband had seen everything. The house was eerily quiet when I finally stumbled through the front door at 3 a.m. My heels clicked against the hardwood floor as I tried to navigate in the darkness, my head pounding from the alcohol and the sudden realization of what I'd done. Elliot was sitting at the kitchen table when I turned on the light, still dressed in his work clothes from the day before. His laptop was open in front of him, and his face was a mask of controlled calm that somehow scared me more than yelling would have. "You're home," he said quietly, not looking up from his screen. "I told you I was going out with Grace," I said defensively, dropping my purse on the counter with more force than necessary. "I don't have a curfew." "No, you don't," he agreed, his voice unnaturally steady. "But you do have a family." The guilt I'd been pushing down all night tried to surface again, but I shoved it away. I wasn't going to let him make me feel bad for finally having some fun. "Don't start with me, Elliot. I'm tired." "I'm sure you are." Something in his tone made me look at him more carefully. His jaw was tight, his hands clenched into fists on the table. This wasn't the usual quiet disappointment I was used to. This was something else entirely. "What's that supposed to mean?" I demanded. "Nothing. Go to bed, Morwenna. We'll talk tomorrow." "We'll talk now if you have something to say," I shot back, my voice rising. "I'm sick of your passive-aggressive comments every time I try to have a social life." Elliot finally looked up at me, and what I saw in his eyes made me take a step back. There was hurt there, yes, but also something harder, something final. "Ava waited up until 11 for you to come home and read her a story," he said quietly. "She cried when I told her you weren't coming back tonight." The mention of our 5-year-old daughter hit me like a physical blow, but I couldn't let him see that. I couldn't let him win this argument by making me feel guilty. "She's fine. You read to her all the time. She doesn't need me there every single night." "You're right," Elliot said, closing his laptop with a soft click. "She doesn't need you there every night, but she needed you there last night and you chose to be somewhere else." "I chose to have a life outside of this house for once," I exploded. "I'm sorry if that's inconvenient for you, but I'm not going to apologize for finally doing something for myself." Elliot stood up slowly, and I noticed how tired he looked. When was the last time I'd really looked at my husband? He was still handsome at 33, tall and lean with kind brown eyes that right now looked anything but kind. "Did you have fun?" he asked. The question caught me off guard. "What?" "Did you have fun dancing with all those men? Did you enjoy letting them touch you while your husband was home taking care of your daughter?" My heart stopped. He knew. Somehow, he knew exactly what had happened at the club. "I don't know what you're talking about," I lied, but my voice came out shaky and unconvincing. "Grace's Instagram stories are very informative," Elliot said calmly, "especially the ones where she tagged you dancing with strangers, and the ones where you're in that corner booth with the bartender." Panic flooded through me, but I forced myself to stay on the offensive. That's what Grace had always told me. When men try to control you, You fight back twice as hard. So, now you're stalking my social media? That's healthy, Elliot. Really mature. I wasn't stalking anything. Grace's stories showed up in my feed because she tagged you. Hard to miss when my wife is grinding on random men at a nightclub. I was dancing. It's called having fun. Maybe you should try it sometime, instead of sitting at home being miserable. Is that what you call it? Elliot's voice was getting quieter, which somehow made it more terrifying. Dancing? Yes, that's what I call it because that's what it was. I'm sorry if you're so insecure that you can't handle your wife talking to other people. Talking to other people, he repeated slowly. Is that what you were doing in that booth? Talking? I could feel the walls closing in, but I refused to back down. I'd learned from my mother that the best defense was a good offense, and I wasn't going to let Elliot intimidate me. You're being ridiculous. Nothing happened. I went out with my friend. We danced. We had some drinks. If you have a problem with that, maybe you should ask yourself why you're so paranoid. Elliot stared at me for a long moment, and I could see him processing my words, deciding whether to believe me or trust what he'd seen with his own eyes. Show me your phone, he said finally. Excuse me. Your phone. Show it to me. The demand hit me like a slap. Who did he think he was, ordering me around like I was a child? Absolutely not, I said, clutching my purse tighter. I'm not going to stand here and be interrogated like some kind of criminal. You don't get to go through my personal things just because you're feeling insecure. Insecure, Elliot repeated, and for the first time, I heard real anger creep into his voice. I'm insecure because I don't want my wife letting strange men grope her in public. Nobody was groping anybody. God, Elliot, do you hear yourself? You're being completely paranoid and controlling. This is exactly why I needed a night out, because living with you is suffocating. The words hung in the air between us, and I saw them hit their target. Elliot's face went pale, and for a moment, he looked like I'd physically struck him. Good, I thought. Maybe now he'd understand how his constant hovering made me feel. I see, he said quietly. So, this is my fault. I didn't say that. You just said living with me is suffocating, that I'm paranoid and controlling because I don't want my wife acting single in public. So yes, you're saying this is my fault. I could hear Ava stirring upstairs, probably woken by our raised voices, and guilt twisted in my stomach. But I couldn't back down now. If I backed down, Elliot would think he could control me forever. I'm saying that maybe if you paid half as much attention to me at home as you do to your work, I wouldn't need to go out to feel appreciated. Appreciated, Elliot said, his voice hollow. Is that what those men were doing? Appreciating you? At least they noticed I was there. The words came out harsher than I'd intended, but I couldn't take them back now. Elliot looked like I'd punched him in the gut. Daddy? Ava's small voice came from the top of the stairs. Why are you and Mummy yelling? We both froze, looking up at our daughter's worried face peering through the banister rails. She was clutching her stuffed elephant, the one Elliot had bought her for her last birthday. Everything's fine, sweetheart, Elliot said, his voice instantly gentle. Go back to bed. Daddy will be up in a minute to tuck you in. Is Mummy in trouble? Ava asked, her big brown eyes, so much like her father's, filled with confusion. Nobody's in trouble, baby, I said, forcing a smile. Mommy and Daddy were just talking. Go back to bed. Ava hesitated for a moment, then disappeared back into her room. I heard her door close softly, and the sound somehow made everything feel more real, more serious. Look what you've done, I whispered harshly at Elliot. Now she's upset, because you couldn't wait until morning to have this conversation. Elliot stared at me for a long moment, and I saw something change in his expression. The hurt was still there, but it was hardening into something else. Something that looked like resolve. You're right, he said quietly. I should have waited until morning. I should have waited until I could think clearly. He started toward the stairs, then paused and looked back at me. For what it's worth, Morwenna, I do notice you. I notice everything about you. That's the problem. He went upstairs to comfort our daughter, leaving me alone in the kitchen with my guilt and my anger and the growing certainty that I'd just crossed a line I couldn't uncross. But I pushed that thought away. Elliot was overreacting, just like my mother had always said men do. He'd calm down in a few days, and things would go back to normal. They always did. I just had to wait it out. Monday morning at the office felt different somehow. I'd barely slept over the weekend, and the tension at home had been suffocating. Elliot had been polite but distant, speaking to me only when necessary, and spending most of his time either working or with Ava. Every time I tried to bring up Friday night, he'd find an excuse to leave the room. "You look tired," my coworker Jessica said as I settled at my desk with my coffee. "Rough weekend?" "Something like that," I muttered, powering up my computer and trying to ignore the way she was studying my face. The insurance office where I worked as an admin assistant was small enough that everyone knew everyone else's business. It was usually a comfort, having people to talk to share stories with. But today, it felt like being under a microscope. "I saw Grace's stories from Friday night," Jessica continued, and my blood ran cold. "Looked like you had a blast at the Vibe." I forced a laugh. "Yeah, it was fun to get out for once. Elliot's been working so much lately. I felt like a single mum." Jessica said, but something in her tone made me look up. She was giving me a look I couldn't quite read. Those were some pretty intense dance moves. Heat flooded my cheeks. We were just having fun. Dancing. You know how it is. "Sure," Jessica said, but she didn't sound convinced. "I'm sure Elliot understands." The way she said my husband's name made my stomach twist. Did she know something? Had she talked to someone? "Of course he understands," I said defensively. "He's not the jealous type." That was a lie, and we both knew it. Elliot had every right to be jealous after what I'd done, but I wasn't about to admit that to Jessica. My phone buzzed with a text from Grace. "Call me ASAP, we need to talk." I excused myself to the bathroom and dialed her number. "Morwenna, thank God," Grace said as soon as she picked up. "We have a problem." "What kind of problem?" "Your husband messaged me this morning. He wants copies of all the videos I took Friday night." My heart stopped. "What did you tell him?" "I told him I'd think about it, but Morwenna, he seemed really serious. Like, scary serious." "What did you tell him happened?" "Nothing. I mean, I told him we were just dancing and having fun. Which is the truth." "The truth?" Grace's voice went up an octave. "Morwenna, you were making out with Damian in that booth for like an hour. I have it all on video." The bathroom suddenly felt too small, too hot. "We weren't making out, we were just talking." "Talking with your tongue down his throat." "Grace, please, you're exaggerating. Maybe we kissed a little, but it wasn't a big deal. People kiss when they're drunk all the time." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Morwenna," Grace said finally, "you're married. You have a kid. This wasn't just some drunk kiss, you were all over him. And now your husband has proof." "He doesn't have proof of anything because nothing happened." I was getting hysterical now, my voice echoing off the bathroom tiles. "And I don't appreciate you making it sound like something it wasn't." "I'm not making it sound like anything. I'm telling you what I saw and what I recorded. If you want to lie to yourself about it, that's your business, but don't drag me into it." The line went dead. Grace had hung up on me. I stared at my reflection in the bathroom mirror. I looked haggard, older than my 31 years. When had those lines appeared around my eyes? When had my face started looking so guilty? No, I wasn't guilty of anything. I'd had some harmless fun with a friend. If Elliot couldn't handle that, it was his problem, not mine. I returned to my desk to find Jessica and 2 other co-workers, Maria and Beth, huddled together by the coffee machine. They stopped talking when they saw me, which made my paranoia spike. "Everything okay?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Fine," Maria said, but she wouldn't meet my eyes. "Just talking about weekend plans." I knew they'd been talking about me. I could feel it in the way they looked at me, the way conversation stopped when I walked by. By lunch, I was convinced the entire office knew about Friday night. This is ridiculous, I told myself as I sat alone in the break room, picking at my sandwich. I didn't do anything wrong. But even as I thought it, I could picture Damian's hands on my waist, his lips against my ear, the way I'd let him touch me in ways that had nothing to do with innocent dancing, the way I'd kissed him back when he'd pulled me into that booth. No, I pushed the memories away. I'd been drinking. I'd been emotional. It hadn't meant anything. My phone rang. My mother. "Morwenna, darling, how are you?" Janet's voice was warm and familiar, exactly what I needed to hear. "I'm okay, Mom, just tired." "I heard you went out with Grace Friday night. Good for you. You need to get out more. That husband of yours works too much. He should be taking you dancing, not making you go alone." The comment about Elliot stung, but also validated what I'd been feeling. My mother understood. She'd always understood how men could be. "Actually, Mom, we had a bit of a fight about it. Elliot's being really unreasonable." "Oh, sweetheart, what happened?" I gave her a carefully edited version of events, how I'd gone out dancing with Grace, how Elliot had seen some social media posts and blown them out of proportion, how he was now being cold and controlling. "Men," Janet sighed, "they can't stand to see us having any independence. Your father was the same way. You need to put your foot down, Morwenna. Don't let him make you feel guilty for having a social life." "But he's saying I was inappropriate with other men." "Were you?" The question caught me off guard. No, I mean, we were just dancing, having fun, nothing serious." "Then he has no right to make you feel bad about it. Marriage isn't ownership, darling. You're allowed to talk to other people, to dance, to enjoy yourself. If Elliot can't handle that, maybe he needs to look at why he's so insecure." Her words were exactly what I needed to hear. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't wrong. Elliot was being unreasonable, just like my mother said. "You're right, Mum. Thank you." "Of course I'm right. Now, you go home tonight and tell that husband of yours that you won't be controlled. You're a grown woman, and you deserve to have fun." I hung up feeling vindicated and stronger. My mother was right. I hadn't done anything wrong. If Elliot couldn't handle his wife having friends and going out occasionally, that was his issue to deal with. But when I got home that evening, I found Linda, Elliot's mother, in my kitchen, making dinner while Ava sat at the table doing homework. "Morwenna," Linda said coolly when I walked in. "How was work?" "Fine," I said, immediately on guard. Linda had never liked me, had always thought her precious son could do better. "What are you doing here?" "Elliot asked me to pick up Ava from school and stay with her until you got home. He had to work late." The way she said "work late" made it sound like she didn't believe it, like she thought he was avoiding me on purpose, which, to be fair, he probably was. "That's nice of you," I said, though we both knew I didn't mean it. "Ava, why don't you go wash your hands for dinner?" Linda said, and our daughter obediently trotted off to the bathroom. As soon as Ava was out of earshot, Linda turned to face me fully, and I saw the same hard expression I'd seen in Elliot's eyes over the weekend. "I don't know what you think you're doing," she said quietly, "but my son doesn't deserve this." "I don't know what you're talking about." "I think you do. I think you know exactly what you're doing, and I think you know exactly how much you're hurting him." "Linda, I appreciate your concern, but my marriage is between Elliot and me." "Not when it affects my granddaughter," she snapped. "Ava asked me today why her daddy was so sad. What was I supposed to tell her?" Guilt twisted in my stomach, but I forced it down. I wasn't going to let Elliot's mother make me feel bad for finally standing up for myself. "You could tell her that sometimes adults have disagreements, and it doesn't mean anything is wrong." "Is that what you call it, a disagreement?" "That's exactly what I call it. Elliot is overreacting to something completely innocent, and instead of supporting your daughter-in-law, you're taking his side." Linda stared at me for a long moment, and I saw something like pity in her eyes. "I've seen the videos, Morwenna." The words hit me like a physical blow. "What?" "Grace sent them to Elliot this afternoon, all of them, So I've seen exactly how innocent your night out was. The room started spinning. Grace had sent the videos. After everything we'd talked about, after I'd explained how Elliot was overreacting, she'd sent them anyway. Those videos don't show anything. They show my daughter-in-law letting strange men put their hands all over her. They show you kissing another man while your husband was home with your child. They show you acting like a single woman when you're married to my son. I couldn't breathe. If Linda had seen the videos, if she knew what had really happened, then Elliot knew too. He knew everything. It didn't mean anything. It meant something to him, Linda said, her voice sad now instead of angry. And it should have meant something to you. She gathered her purse and headed for the door, pausing only to call goodbye to Ava. Linda, wait, I called after her, but she was already gone. I stood alone in my kitchen, surrounded by the smell of the dinner she'd made for my family, and finally allowed myself to acknowledge the truth I'd been running from all weekend. I was in serious trouble. Elliot came home just after 8, long after Ava had gone to bed, and I'd spent hours pacing the house, rehearsing what I was going to say. I decided to go on the offensive, attack before he could attack me. It was the only way to regain control of the situation. We need to talk, I said as soon as he walked through the door. Yes, we do, he agreed, but his tone was different than I'd expected. Calm, resolved. It made me nervous. I can't believe you got your mother involved in our personal business, I started, following him into the living room. That was completely inappropriate, Elliot. What happens between us should stay between us. You're right, he said, sitting down on the couch and pulling out his phone. It should stay between us. But you made that impossible when you decided to broadcast your affair on social media. It wasn't an affair. The words came out louder than I'd intended. God, Elliot, do you even hear yourself? You're calling it an affair because I danced with some people and had a few drinks. Is that really the story you're going with? He looked up at me, and there was something in his expression that made my stomach drop. Even after Grace sent me the videos, my carefully prepared speech crumbled. The videos don't show anything inappropriate. Don't they? Elliot stood up and walked to the TV, connecting his phone to it. Let's watch them together and you can tell me what you see. Elliot, don't... But it was too late. The screen lit up with Grace's Instagram story from Friday night, and I watched in horror as my own face appeared, flushed and laughing as I danced with the first stranger. The timestamp showed 10:47 p.m. This is you dancing, Elliot said calmly. Notice how his hands are on your waist, how you're pressing against him. But maybe that's innocent, right? Maybe that's just dancing. The video switched to another clip. 11:23 p.m. Me with a different man, this one's hands lower on my hips, my arms around his neck. I looked drunk, reckless, nothing like the responsible mother and wife I was supposed to be. Still just dancing? Elliot asked. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. It was like watching a car accident, horrifying but impossible to ignore. The next clip was the worst one. 12:15 a.m. Me in the corner booth with Damian, his arm around me, his lips against my ear. And then, God help me. I watched myself turn my head and kiss him. Not a quick drunken peck, but a real kiss. A kiss that lasted several seconds and left no doubt about my intentions. Turn it off, I whispered. There's more, Elliot said, his voice still unnaturally calm. Grace was very thorough in documenting your evening. Should we keep watching? Turn it off. He did, and the room fell into silence. I could hear the clock ticking on the mantel, the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen, my own heart pounding in my chest. So, Elliot said finally, still want to tell me it was innocent? I felt cornered, trapped by my own actions played back in high definition. But I couldn't give up now. If I admitted what I'd done, if I acknowledged how badly I'd screwed up, then Elliot would have all the power. It was just a kiss, I said weakly. I was drunk. It didn't mean anything. Just a kiss, he repeated, with a man who isn't your husband, while your daughter was home asking when Mommy was coming back. Don't bring Ava into this. Ava is already in this. For the first time, Elliot's composure cracked, and I heard real anger in his voice. She's in this because she has a mother who thinks it's okay to act single when she's married. She's in this because she has a mother who cares more about getting attention from strangers than being home with her family. That's not fair. Isn't it? When was the last time you read her a bedtime story? When was the last time you helped her with homework? When was the last time you acted like being her mother was more important than going out and getting validation from random men? The accusations hit like physical blows because they contained just enough truth to hurt. I had been distracted lately, had been feeling suffocated by the routine of family life, but that didn't make me a bad mother. I'm a good mother, I said, my voice shaking. I love Ava. I know you do, but love isn't enough anymore, Morwenna. Not when you're teaching her that this is what marriage looks like. Not when you're showing her that commitments don't matter when you're feeling neglected. I'm not teaching her anything. She doesn't know about any of this. She knows her parents are fighting. She knows something is wrong. Kids aren't stupid. They pick up on everything. I felt tears starting to build behind my eyes, but I blinked them back. I wouldn't let him see me cry. I wouldn't give him that satisfaction. So what do you want from me, Elliot? You want me to apologize for having one night of fun? You want me to promise to never go out again, to just sit home and be your perfect little housewife? I want you to acknowledge what you did, he said quietly. I want you to admit that you cheated on me, that you betrayed our marriage, that you humiliated me in front of everyone we know. I didn't cheat, it was just a kiss. It was cheating, Morwenna, and we both know it didn't stop at kissing. The implication hung in the air between us. He was right, it hadn't stopped at kissing. After Grace had stopped recording, after the club had started to empty out, Damian and I had gone to his car. We'd talked about going back to his place. We'd done things that I couldn't even admit to myself, let alone to my husband. But Elliot couldn't know that. Grace hadn't recorded that part. As far as he knew, it had just been the kissing. You're being paranoid, I said, but my voice lacked conviction. Am I? Then show me your phone. Show me your text messages with this Damian guy. Show me that nothing else happened. I'm not showing you anything. You don't get to go through my personal things just because you're feeling insecure. Insecure? Elliot laughed, but there was no humor in it. You know what, Morwenna? You're right, I am insecure. I'm insecure because my wife of 6 years just threw away our marriage for some bartender she barely knows. I'm insecure because the woman I love, the mother of my child, cares so little about our family that she's willing to destroy it for a few hours of attention. I didn't destroy anything. You're the one making a big deal out of nothing. Nothing? Elliot's voice rose. You call cheating on me nothing? I didn't cheat. Then what do you call it? I call it making a mistake. I call it being human. I call it what happens when your husband ignores you for months and makes you feel invisible in your own home. There it was, the real truth I'd been holding back. The reason I'd gone to the club, the reason I'd let Damian touch me, the reason I'd kissed him back. Elliot had driven me to it with his neglect, his distance, his constant work and lack of attention. So, this is my fault, Elliot said quietly. I didn't say that. You just said I drove you to cheat because I ignored you and made you feel invisible. I said I made a mistake because I was feeling neglected. There's a difference. Is there? Because it sounds like you're saying I'm responsible for your choices. I could feel the conversation slipping away from me, could feel Elliot gaining the upper hand. I needed to regain control, needed to make him understand that he wasn't blameless in this situation. All I'm saying is that maybe if you paid half as much attention to your wife as you do to your job, none of this would have happened. Elliot stared at me for a long moment, and I saw something die in his eyes, something that had been there since the day we met, something warm and loving and trusting, just gone. You're right, he said finally. This is my fault. I should have seen who you really were a long time ago. The word stung more than I'd expected. What's that supposed to mean? It means I've been making excuses for you for years, telling myself you were just going through a phase, that you'd grow out of the selfishness, that you'd eventually prioritize your family over your own desires. But you're not going to change, are you? This is who you are. Elliot. No, let me finish. I've spent 6 years trying to make you happy, trying to be the husband you wanted, trying to give you everything you said you needed. But it's never enough, is it? There's always something else, always some other reason why you're not satisfied. I wanted to argue, wanted to defend myself, but the words wouldn't come. Because deep down, I knew he was right. I had been constantly finding fault, constantly wanting more, constantly feeling like something was missing. I love you, I said instead, and I meant it. Despite everything, despite the mess I'd made, I did love him. I know you do, Elliot said, and his voice was sad now instead of angry. But love isn't enough anymore, not when you love the attention of strangers more than you love our marriage, not when you love the thrill of cheating more than you love our family. That's not true, isn't it? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you love everything more than you love us. He picked up his phone and headed toward the stairs. Where are you going? I asked. To pack a bag. I'm going to stay at Dylan's for a few days while I figure out what to do next. Panic flooded through me. You're leaving? I'm giving us both some space to think. Elliot, please, we can work this out. It was just one night, one stupid mistake. Don't throw away our whole marriage over this. He paused at the bottom of the stairs and looked back at me. I'm not the one who threw away our marriage, Morwenna. You did that when you decided another man's attention was more important than your family. He went upstairs, leaving me alone in the living room with the silent TV and the crushing realization that I might have just lost everything that mattered. But even as the thought crossed my mind, I pushed it away. Elliot was being dramatic. He was hurt and angry, but he'd calmed down. He'd realized that everyone makes mistakes, that one night of poor judgment wasn't worth destroying a family over. He'd come back. He had to come back, because if he didn't, I'd have to face the possibility that I'd been wrong about everything. The next few days passed in a blur of unanswered texts and phone calls. Elliot had left Tuesday morning with a single suitcase and a promise to call Ava every night, which he'd kept religiously. But he wouldn't talk to me, wouldn't answer my messages, wouldn't even acknowledge my existence beyond the necessary logistics of sharing custody. I'd called in sick to work Wednesday, unable to face the knowing looks and whispered conversations. By Thursday, I was going stir-crazy in the house, jumping every time my phone buzzed, hoping it would be Elliot finally ready to talk. Instead, it was Grace. We need to meet, she said when I answered. Can you come to my apartment? Grace, thank God. I've been trying to reach you for days. Why did you send those videos to Elliot? I thought we were friends. Just come over. We'll talk when you get here. Something in her tone made my stomach clench, but I needed to see her. I needed someone on my side, someone who understood that I wasn't the villain in this story. Grace's apartment was in a trendy part of downtown, all exposed brick and industrial lighting. When she opened the door, she looked uncomfortable, avoiding my eyes as she led me to her living room. Drink? She offered. It's 2 p.m, Grace. Trust me, you're going to want one. She poured herself a large glass of wine and settled into the chair across from me, still not making eye contact. Why did you send him the videos? I asked without preamble. Because he asked for them, and I didn't have a choice. Of course you had a choice. You could have said no, you could have deleted them, you could have... Morwenna, stop. Grace finally looked at me, and what I saw in her face made my blood run cold. He didn't just ask for them, he demanded them, through his lawyer. The words hit me like a physical blow. His lawyer? He's filing for divorce, and he's using the videos as evidence of adultery. The room started spinning. He's what? I got a letter Tuesday morning from some law firm downtown. They wanted all the videos and photos from Friday night, and they made it very clear that I could either cooperate voluntarily or be subpoenaed. I'm sorry, Morwenna. but I'm not going to jail for perjury to protect you from the consequences of your own actions. I couldn't breathe. Divorce. Elliot was actually filing for divorce. He's bluffing, I said, more to myself than to Grace. He's just trying to scare me. He wouldn't actually. He's not bluffing. I called the law firm to verify. They confirmed that Elliot Hale is their client and that they're handling his divorce proceedings. But we can work this out. It was just one night, one stupid mistake. He can't throw away 6 years of marriage over one night. Grace was quiet for a long moment, swirling the wine in her glass. Morwenna, she said finally, it wasn't just one night. What do you mean? I mean you've been flirting with Damian for weeks. I mean you've been complaining about your marriage and talking about how unhappy you are for months. I mean Friday night wasn't some isolated incident. It was the culmination of choices you've been making for a long time. I stared at her, feeling betrayed. So you're taking his side now? I'm not taking anyone's side. I'm just being honest about what I've witnessed. What you've witnessed? Grace, you're the one who encouraged me. You're the one who said I deserved better, that I should live my life, that marriage wasn't ownership. I encouraged you to have fun, not to cheat on your husband. I didn't cheat. You made out with another man while your husband was home with your kid. What do you call that? I felt like I was drowning, like everyone I'd counted on for support was abandoning me when I needed them most. I thought you were my friend, I whispered. I am your friend. That's why I'm telling you the truth instead of enabling your delusions. You screwed up, Morwenna. Badly. And now you need to figure out how to deal with the consequences instead of pretending it didn't happen. I left Grace's apartment feeling more alone than I'd ever felt in my life. My husband was filing for divorce. My best friend had turned against me. And I was facing the possibility of losing everything I'd taken for granted. But I still had my mother. Janet would understand, would help me figure out how to fight back. Divorce? My mother's voice was sharp with anger when I called her from my car. He's filing for divorce over one night of innocent fun. Who does he think he is? Mom, it wasn't completely innocent, I admitted. I did kiss someone, but it didn't mean anything, and I don't understand why everyone is acting like it's the end of the world. Men are all the same, Janet said dismissively. They can't handle their wives having any independence. Your father tried to pull the same controlling nonsense with me. But what do I do? He's serious about this, Mom. He's hired a lawyer. Then you hire a lawyer too. You fight him. You make sure he can't take Ava away from you or leave you with nothing. Marriage is a partnership, sweetheart, and he can't just walk away because his feelings are hurt. The conversation with my mother made me feel marginally better, but when I got home, I found an envelope that had been slipped under my front door. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside were legal documents: petition for dissolution of marriage, temporary custody agreement, financial disclosure requirements. It was real. Elliot was actually divorcing me. I called him immediately, but it went straight to voicemail. Elliot, please call me back. We need to talk about this. You can't just file for divorce without even trying to work things out. Please, just call me. He didn't call back. I tried Dylan next, but he answered on the first ring. Morwenna. Dylan, thank God. Is Elliot there? He won't answer my calls. He's here, but he doesn't want to talk to you. Please, just put him on the phone for 5 minutes. I need to explain. There's nothing to explain. We've all seen the videos. The judgment in his voice stung. Dylan had always been kind to me, had always treated me like a real sister. Now he sounded like a stranger. Dylan, you don't understand. It wasn't what it looked like. It looked like you cheating on my brother. It was just a kiss. I was drunk and stupid, but it didn't mean anything. It meant something to him. But we can work through this. People make mistakes. People forgive each other. That's what marriage is about. Dylan was quiet for a moment. Morwenna, he said finally, do you want to know what Elliot was doing Friday night while you were at that club? What do you mean? He was planning a surprise trip for your anniversary next month. He'd booked a weekend in Napa, arranged for Mum to watch Ava, even bought you a new necklace. He was so excited to surprise you." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. While I'd been letting another man touch me, my husband had been planning a romantic getaway. While I'd been complaining about feeling neglected, he'd been trying to show me how much he loved me. "I didn't know," I whispered. "Of course you didn't, because you never asked. You just assumed he didn't care, assumed he was neglecting you, assumed you had every right to go looking for attention somewhere else." "Dylan, please. I have to go. Don't call here again unless it's about Ava." The line went dead. I sat in my empty house, surrounded by legal documents and the wreckage of my marriage, and finally allowed myself to acknowledge the truth I'd been running from. This was all my fault. But even as the thought crossed my mind, anger flared up to protect me from the guilt. Yes, I'd made a mistake. Yes, I'd kissed another man. But Elliot was overreacting. Divorce was extreme, vindictive, designed to punish me rather than heal our marriage. If he wanted to play hardball, I could play hardball too. I picked up my phone and started searching for divorce lawyers. The process server showed up at my office on Friday afternoon, right in the middle of the weekly staff meeting. I was sitting at the conference table with 8 of my co-workers when the receptionist knocked on the door. "Morwenna, there's someone here to see you." I excused myself and walked to the front desk, where a stern-looking woman in a business suit was waiting with a manila envelope. "Morwenna Hale." "Yes?" "You've been served." She handed me the envelope and walked away, leaving me standing in the reception area with every eye in the office on me. I could feel the heat of their stares, could practically hear the gossip mill starting to churn. With shaking hands, I opened the envelope. More legal documents, but these were different from the ones I'd received earlier in the week. These were detailed, comprehensive, devastating. Elliot wasn't just asking for a divorce. He was asking for primary custody of Ava, citing my pattern of irresponsible behavior and infidelity as evidence that I was an unfit mother. He was asking for the house, for most of our shared assets, for everything that mattered. And attached to the petition was a thumb drive labeled Evidence. I knew without looking what was on that drive. The videos from Grace, yes, but probably more. Text messages I'd thought were private. Photos I'd forgotten existed. A comprehensive record of every poor choice I'd made in recent months. "Everything okay?" Jessica asked when I returned to the conference room, but her tone suggested she already knew the answer. "Fine," I lied, clutching the papers against my chest. "Just some personal stuff." But nothing was fine. Nothing had been fine since Friday night, and I was starting to realize that nothing would be fine again. After work, I drove straight to Dylan's apartment. I needed to see Elliot, needed to make him understand that we could work through this if he'd just give us a chance. Dylan answered the door, but didn't invite me in. "He doesn't want to see you, Morwenna." "Please, just 5 minutes. I need to explain." "Explain what? How you've been texting with that bartender for weeks. How you've been planning to see him again. How you told your co-workers that your husband was boring and you were thinking about leaving him." My blood ran cold. "How do you know about that?" "Because Elliot hired a private investigator. Because when you destroy someone's trust completely, they stop taking your word for anything." A private investigator. The humiliation was complete. "Dylan, please. I know I made mistakes, but I love him. I love our family. We can get counseling. We can work through this." "You should have thought about that before you decided to cheat. It was just a kiss." "Was it?" Dylan's voice was hard. "Because the investigator has photos of you leaving that bar with the guy. Photos of you in his car. Photos of you going into his apartment building and not coming out until 3 a.m. The world tilted sideways. Someone had been watching me, documenting my every move, building a case against me. The full scope of my betrayal was laid bare, and there was no way to deny it anymore. "I want to see him," I said desperately. "I want to see my husband." "He's not your husband anymore," Dylan said. "The papers were filed this morning. It's over, Morwenna." He closed the door in my face, leaving me standing in the hallway with the weight of my choices crushing down on me. I drove home in a daze, my mind reeling with the implications of what Dylan had told me. Elliot knew everything, not just about the kissing, not just about the dancing, but about the hours I'd spent in Damian's apartment, about the things we'd done that I'd convinced myself didn't count as real cheating. He knew, and he'd documented it all. When I got home, Linda's car was in my driveway. I found her in the kitchen with Ava, helping my daughter with her homework. "Grandma Linda!" Ava ran to me when I walked in. "Grandma's making my favorite dinner." "That's nice, sweetheart," I said, forcing a smile. "Why don't you go wash your hands?" As soon as Ava was out of earshot, Linda turned to face me. "The custody hearing is Monday," she said without preamble. "I know. Elliot's going to win." "We don't know that." Linda gave me a look that was part pity, part disgust. "Morwenna, he has video evidence of you cheating. He has witness statements from your co-workers about your behavior. He has documentation of your affair going back weeks. What do you have?" I didn't answer because we both knew I had nothing. No evidence of Elliot's wrongdoing, no proof that he'd been a bad husband or father, no justification for what I'd done. "I'm here to get some of Ava's things," Linda continued. "She's going to stay with us until this is resolved." "You can't take her. She's my daughter." "She's also Elliot's daughter, and he has temporary custody as of this afternoon. You can fight it in court if you want, but given the evidence against you, I wouldn't recommend it." The reality of my situation finally hit me. I wasn't just losing my husband. I was losing my daughter, my home, my entire life. Everything I'd taken for granted was disappearing because of one night of selfish choices. "This isn't fair," I whispered. "Fair?" Linda's voice rose. "You want to talk about fair? Is it fair that my son spent 6 years loving you, providing for you, trying to make you happy, only to have you throw it all away for some bartender you barely know? Is it fair that my granddaughter has to grow up in a broken home because her mother cared more about getting attention from strangers than protecting her family?" I had no answer for that because she was right. None of this was fair to Elliot or to Ava, but it wasn't fair to me either, to have my entire life destroyed over one mistake. "I love them," I said weakly. "I know you do, but love isn't enough when you've betrayed it this completely." Linda finished packing Ava's bag and called my daughter back into the kitchen. "Ready to go to Grandma and Grandpa's house?" she asked brightly. "Are you coming too, Mummy?" Ava asked, looking between Linda and me with confusion. "Not tonight, sweetheart, but I'll see you soon." "Why can't I stay here with you?" The innocent question broke my heart. How do you explain to a 5-year-old that Mommy made choices that hurt Daddy, that the family she'd always known was falling apart because of things she couldn't understand? "Sometimes grown-ups need to figure some things out," I said, kneeling down to hug her. "But I love you so much, and that will never change." "I love you too, Mummy." After they left, I sat alone in my kitchen and finally allowed myself to cry. Not the angry tears I'd been fighting all week, but deep, wrenching sobs that came from the realization that I'd lost everything that mattered. My phone rang. It was my mother. "Morwenna, I just heard from Linda. She said they took Ava." "Temporarily, until the custody hearing." "This is ridiculous. You're her mother. They can't just take her away from you because you had one night of fun." But even my mother's support felt hollow now, because it hadn't been just one night of fun. It had been weeks of emotional cheating, of planning and scheming, of putting my own desires above my family's well-being. "Mum, I need to tell you something. It wasn't just one night. I've been seeing this guy for a while. And Friday night, we didn't just kiss. We went back to his place." There was silence on the other end of the line. "Mum? How could you be so stupid?" Janet's voice was sharp with disappointment. "How could you risk everything for some random man?" "I thought you said men overreact to these things. I thought you said I deserved to have fun." "I said you deserve to have fun, not destroy your marriage. There's a difference between going out dancing and having an affair." Even my mother was abandoning me now, joining the chorus of people who thought I was entirely to blame for the destruction of my family. "I don't know what to do," I whispered. "You hire the best lawyer you can afford, and you fight for your daughter. That's what you do." But I'd already tried that. The lawyer I'd consulted had been blunt about my chances. With the evidence Elliot had compiled, with my admitted infidelity, with my pattern of putting my own desires above my family's needs, I had very little chance of winning primary custody. The best I could hope for was supervised visitation and a minimal financial settlement. I'd lost everything, and it was entirely my own fault. Sunday night, I got a text from an unknown number. "Heard about the divorce. Sorry it didn't work out. Maybe we can hang out again sometime. Damian." I stared at the message for a long time, thinking about the man who'd helped destroy my marriage. He'd moved on already, probably never giving me a second thought, while I was losing my husband, my daughter, and my home. I deleted the message without responding. Monday morning, I dressed carefully for the custody hearing, choosing a conservative outfit that I hoped would make me look like a responsible mother. But I knew it was pointless. The evidence against me was overwhelming, and no amount of careful presentation could change what I'd done. Elliot was already at the courthouse when I arrived, flanked by his lawyer and his family. He looked tired but determined, and when our eyes met across the hallway, I saw nothing but cold resolve. The hearing was brief and devastating. Elliot's lawyer presented the evidence methodically: the videos, the photos, the text messages, the witness statements, a complete picture of my infidelity and deception. My lawyer did her best to argue for joint custody, to paint my actions as a temporary lapse in judgment rather than a pattern of behavior. But it was hopeless. The judge awarded Elliot primary custody, with me getting supervised visitation every other weekend. The house, the bank accounts, most of our shared assets, everything went to him. I was left with almost nothing. As we filed out of the courtroom, Elliot approached me for the first time in weeks. "I'm sorry it came to this," he said quietly, "but you made your choices, and now we all have to live with the consequences. Elliot, please, can't we try counseling? Can't we try to work this out for Ava's sake?" He looked at me with something that might have been pity. "Morwenna, you had an affair. You lied about it. You tried to gaslight me into thinking I was paranoid, and even when confronted with video evidence, you tried to minimize what you'd done. There's no coming back from that. People forgive affairs all the time. People work through these things. Some people do, but those people are genuinely remorseful. They take responsibility for their actions. They do the work to rebuild trust." He paused. "You've done none of those things. Even now, you're still trying to find ways to make this not your fault." He was right, and we both knew it. Even in that moment, part of me was looking for someone else to blame, some way to make my actions seem less devastating than they were. "I love you," I said desperately. "I love Ava. I love our family." "I know you do. But love without respect, love without commitment, love without sacrifice, that's not enough. That's not what marriage is." He walked away, leaving me standing alone in the courthouse hallway with the ruins of my life scattered around me. 6 months later, I was living in a small apartment across town, working a new job because the gossip at my old office had become unbearable. I saw Ava every other weekend under the watchful eye of a court-appointed supervisor, and each visit was a painful reminder of what I'd lost. Elliot had moved on with admirable grace, focusing on his daughter and his career. I'd heard through mutual acquaintances that he was dating someone new, a teacher at Ava's school who was kind and stable in everything I hadn't been. I still thought about that night at the club sometimes, about the choices that had seemed so harmless in the moment, but had cost me everything. I thought about Damian, who disappeared from my life as quickly as he'd entered it, leaving me to deal with the consequences alone. But mostly, I thought about the look in Elliot's eyes when he'd seen those videos, the moment when his love for me had died, and been replaced by something harder and more final. I'd thrown away 6 years of marriage, a beautiful daughter, and a man who'd loved me unconditionally, all for a few hours of attention from a stranger who'd never cared about me at all. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd felt neglected and invisible in my marriage, so I'd sought validation elsewhere. Now I was truly alone, truly invisible, with no one to blame but myself. Sometimes I wondered if Elliot ever missed me, ever regretted how completely he'd cut me out of his life. But I knew the answer. He'd moved on because that's what healthy people do when someone betrays them so completely. I was the only one still living in the wreckage of that night, still paying the price for choices that had seemed so justified at the time. The legal documents had been just the beginning. The real punishment was living every day with the knowledge that I'd destroyed the best thing in my life for absolutely nothing.